So after watching this video, you'll know one of the simplest but most powerful and effective technique to wake up from the dream to quote-unquote enlightenment. This is something that will also help you immensely to rewire your mind and lose bad habits or addictions in an effortless way. So if this sounds interesting to you, without further ado, let's get into it. So you probably heard the phrase know thyself, but what does this even mean? What does it mean to know yourself? How do you do that? This is, for good reasons, a phrase that all sages repeat and all sages see the truth of it. And this video is about specifically how to do that, which is in the direct way of self-observation. And to really concisely put the importance of this way, I share with you this lovely quote by George Gurdjieff. Self-observation brings man to the realization of the necessity for self-change. And in observing himself, a man notices that self-observation itself brings about certain changes in his inner processes. He begins to understand that self-observation is an instrument of self-change, a means of awakening. By observing himself, he throws, as it were, a ray of light onto his inner processes, which have hitherto worked in complete darkness. And under the influence of this light, the processes themselves begin to change. So self-observation is really at the core of all the inner transformation that you'll go through, and the way to waking up to what is actually happening inside and outside yourself, in reality and in your mind. So there is a fundamental point that we have to clear if you want to be able to observe ourselves as we are clearly. And this is the difference between thinking about yourself and observing yourself, which you may think that they are the same thing, but in fact they are crucially different. When you are thinking about yourself, which is something that you are doing every day, all the time, you are self-absorbed. You are lost into your own mind processes while being unaware of what you are actually doing or thinking or feeling. And the simple fact of observing that is completely different. The observation itself is not thinking. Observing yourself will in this way reveal a ton of things that you are not seeing when you are just thinking about yourself. So you can think about yourself without observing yourself, and you can have thoughts while you are observing yourself. Move your body while you are observing yourself moving the body. Feeling things while you observe the feeling, while you observe the self having the feeling. So this is a simple shift, and it is so simple that you may think that there is no real difference, but it's incredibly different. Just a simple shift from being absorbed in the self, which is full of uneasiness and anxiety that maybe is even unconscious, to an observation of that will bring immediate release from the self which is observed, because you will be able to see it from a witness perspective, from a pure witnessing perspective, which has no judgment, which is not interpreting what is happening, and so it's seeing actually what is happening as it is happening. And this is completely different than all the interpretations that your mind gives about situations and its reactions. You will be able to actually see why you are reacting in a certain way, why you are thinking in a certain way, and by this pure seeing, ton of things about yourself and your action, your motivation will be revealed. So by this simple process of pure observation, without doing anything about yourself, without wanting to interfere and trying to do the things in that way or this way, you are just observing all these processes. You're observing your self process. The more you do that, the more your identification with the mind will release. Because when you are thinking about yourself without observing yourself, without being conscious of yourself, you are fully identified. But when you are observing, automatically you are releasing from the identification. So by losing this identification and staying in watching, you will come to know your true self, which is the consciousness that is witnessing the self. By staying in that observer, by really grounding yourself in it, being it, you will be released from all the reaction of the self, and you will come to understand the nature of what you are feeling, because you are seeing it as it is rather than through the lens of the self. The other point that I wanted to touch about is that through this observation you will be able to drop your bad habits and addictions effortlessly. What I mean by effortlessly is that you are not the one which is trying to stop the addiction. You are not doing anything about them, which is just perpetuating them, and it's just a constant effort that usually goes back to a relapse. By this observation, you will be able to automatically free yourself from these habits thanks to the observation itself. You have to understand that the power is not in the doer which want to stop being addicted, but it is in the observation itself, on the consciousness itself of yourself in the addiction. So for example, when you will have the craving to smoke a cigarette, the awareness itself of the craving without being involved in it, without getting lost in it, just being aware of yourself having the craving. If you're able to stay on that, the more you stay on that awareness itself, the awareness itself will dissolve the addiction, not your own efforts. Of course, this is something that will take time, but the more you are observing, the more the pattern of the addiction will lose its intensity, because it's there only because you are identified with the self which is addicted. And so you react to the addiction and you keep the self going. But through pure observation of the fact while it is happening, the observation itself will make you lose the identification with the self which is addicted, with the pattern of the addiction itself, and you will be able to release from it. So in time, the more your consciousness rises above and gets detached from the identification, the more the neural pathway which is formed in your brain, which is the habit, will lose its solidity neurophysiologically. Thanks to neuroplasticity, it will lose bondage, and so you will not repeat the action, will stop repeating the action because it will lose its power over you. So it's fundamental to see the difference between you being sad and you observing yourself being sad, observing the sadness, or you being angry and you observing the one who is angry. This is a, as I said, simple but crucial switch, and it recontextualizes your whole experience immediately. And by doing so, you will not be at the mercy of the self, of the ego self. The ego self will lose its power over you because all its power is tied to self-identification. It's tied to your identification with it. By this observation, the identification will be lost and you will be back to your true nature. So it's really important that you just don't watch this video and understand it conceptually. If you want to really have the benefit of that, you'll have to start doing it actually, right now. Start to every day observe yourself. This is something that you can do also in formal meditation. So just sitting, for example, 20 minutes and for the whole time observing yourself. But this is also something that becomes way more powerful when you are able to do it on a daily basis. If you start to watch yourself when you react in a certain way, when you get angry, when you get nervous, observe your body, how it is reacting. Really observe how your mind is acting, your ego self-mind is acting on a daily basis. The more you are able to do that, the more the fruits of this will come. It's not something that you need a lot of time for it to start working. I'm saying this to you because you can start doing this right now, and just by starting right now, in some days you will start to noticing things already. And if you just keep doing that, in just 1 or 2 weeks, you will see how so much things have been relieved, so much things has been revealed of yourself, and you will understand much more how yourself and your mind work, and you will be much more free from the power of the mind over you. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. If so, please drop a comment. Let me know if there is something that you would like for me to cover. And if you want to work with me freely on a holistic coaching self-improvement call, check the link box below. I will be glad to try to help you to understand what is blocking you from what you want to achieve, and really seeing and clearly pointing to you what is blocking you from your growth, from both a consciousness perspective and a general life and self-improvement perspective. Other than that, if you struggle with depression or anxiety, feel free to check my free ebook with practical and effective practices and behavior that you can implement in your daily life to get out and stay out of depression. And I'm done here. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you in the next one.